Today, we are tackling a big and maybe uncomfortable question. Are we settling for selfish revival? That's the question. Everywhere you look lately, people are talking about revival. And honestly, I love it. I am here for it. I love the hunger for God, the passionate worship, the boldness of faith. I love it all. But I've also started to wonder if we're calling something revival that is really just emotional renewal. Let me take you back in time for a minute. Do you remember February 2023? Everybody in the kind of Christian space had a hot take on the Asbury revival. Do you remember that moment? It's hard to believe it's been more than 2 years, 2.5 years. When the news of Asbury College service kind of turned into a multi-day worship experience, and when that news surfaced, you know what I honestly thought? And I don't mind telling you this because I can be a little cynical. It sounds like something a bunch of 20-somethings would do. That's what I first thought. My second thought, though, was, what is revival? After all, what is revival? I had a 21-year-old son at the time who was deeply faithful and a believer, and still is, by the way. And we began talking about this. And his responses were interesting, not nearly as cynical as his older dad's were. I grew up mainly in a Baptist church in the south side of Atlanta. As a kid, our church hosted, not a lot, but occasionally there was a revival. And, friends from other churches would invite me to theirs, and I would invite them to ours. And so I got to see several revivals along my way. And even though with my limited experience of revivals, and most of them being, child and teenage, that kind of term took on a real meaning for me. A revival was an evangelism kind of mechanism meant to spread the gospel. And less officially, it was about altar calls and counting raised hands. And, remember that with every head bowed and every eye closed. And then you'd sing these hymns at the end, Into My Heart or I Surrender All, until somebody just finally surrendered so we could go home. I'm being cynical, I joke. But it did seem like sometimes we just sang one more hymn, one more time, because maybe truly we did need to give the Spirit more time to work, or maybe just the number wasn't what we were hoping. I don't know. But it felt that way at times. At the age of 10, most of the experiences, I could feel this even at the age of 10, most of the experiences kind of felt a little manipulated. The feeling kind of really took hold, I think, in some people's heart, but I'm not sure if it piqued everyone as much as we pretended it did, especially during the every head bowed, every eye closed, where most heads were kind of bowed and one eye was peeking to look around. I've heard of, even revival pastors counting hands and claiming salvations that weren't there, because I looked around and saw no hands were up. So again, it's easy to be cynical about these things. And I can easily feel that sometimes creeping in again. I could also just be a little old. I don't know. I like to think experienced. But here's what I do know. I know that when the Asbury, and back to them again, when that experience became public, I was certainly curious, because I was prayerfully hoping that the revival was true revival. But there was this other part of me that thought, well, I've seen this before. Again, I don't know how you felt about it, but that's kind of where I was. Now, since then, let's just keep going. Since then, this word revival, and I don't know if it was launched out of Asbury, at least on that bigger level, but since then, it seems like we have seen a rise in revival-like experiences, especially, it seems like, on college campuses. Have you noticed that? Like, I have watched several college football teams that I have embraced a hatred for my entire life, and by the way, for no good reason. And I'm not hating a person, okay? I don't know if it's sinful to hate a mascot, but whatever. There are teams that I just do not like at all. And I'm watching a game and seeing 80% of their players praying together in the end zone before and after games. And it's not fake prayer. You hear some of these players talk. They are genuinely pursuing Jesus. They love Jesus. I've seen video after video of athletes in colleges and students in colleges baptizing hundreds of people. The star athlete not taking all that NIL money and buying Lamborghinis, but instead using the platform that God has given them through athletics to lead their peers to Jesus, baptizing them, being public about their faith. I mean, when you see all that, it makes you think that revival must be afoot, that something is actually happening. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a gathering of pastors and kind of Christian influencers, and one of the women who leads a lot of these big revival-esque experiences on college campuses was there. And while she was on the stage at one point, she was just talking about how revival is breaking out across college campuses. And I got to tell you, she was inspiring. You could feel her passion. And when you heard her talk about it, it was hard to deny that that might be the reality. However, this kind of broke a category for me. So just hang with me. And I don't even know how true any of this is, but it really made me think. The next day, I'm sitting in a circle of people, and there was another leader in my circle. I'm going to tell you her race, not that it matters, but it's interesting because of her perspective. So she's a Black woman, and she leads an organization that helps all races come together and understand each other's perspective and experiences, not just for the sake of empathy, but so that we can better see each other. And I think there's something powerful to that. Yeah, of course, in the extremes, anything can be a problem. But the idea that, for instance, I know what it's like to be a 50-year-old white male, I totally get that. But that's about all I totally get. I don't really know what it's like to be Hispanic or Black or a female. I don't know those things. So her job and her organization helps people meet with others that are not like them and learn what it's like to not be them. I think it's great. It's a Christian nonprofit. So this leader, this Black female leader of this Christian nonprofit, she was pretty upset. And as this revival conversation continues, at some point she stood up and somebody handed her a microphone, and she, as nicely as she could, she didn't want to talk, but we kind of encouraged her to because of what she had to say. And I can't quote her exactly, but she said something like this: if revival is really here, why isn't it changing everything, everyone, in every space? Now, let me just be honest. As a middle-aged white person, I heard that and thought, well, it looks like it is changing a lot of things. And it's definitely changing a lot of people. And it feels like there's a move of the Spirit on college campuses at times. And it feels like there's a move of attendance in church a little bit. And we're watching Gen Z come back to church in greater numbers than we did with the millennials, right? So yeah, there's something happening. But that question stuck. Why isn't this revival changing not just people, but places, structures, systems? She went on to say, as a Black individual in this country, and again, I don't know how true any of this is, but she said she has less rights today than her mother or grandmother had. Now, again, I heard that, and again, cynical maybe, but my first thought was, I'm not sure that's true. But it felt true to her, and she's looking, and I can empathize with this. I mean, sympathize with this. She's looking at structures, governmental structures. She's looking at a poverty structure. She's looking at a lot of different things that, again, may or may not be holistically perfectly true. But from her perspective, it sure feels that way. And she's saying, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people come to Jesus, but I'm not seeing those Jesus people changing the things around them that are making places different. That idea, like her question, it really stuck with me. It's been several weeks and I'm talking about it still, right? And in a way, I think she's right, though. Again, maybe not about everything, but if revival doesn't transform how we live, how we serve, and how we lead in our communities, maybe, I don't know, is it revival at all? I mean, when we look at Scripture, revival is never just about feelings. It's about transformation. Again, you all know the stuff in Acts 2 about Pentecost. Remember, Peter preaches this sermon, and 3,000 people responded. But that's not the only thing that happened, right? It sparked something bigger. And the real revival moment happened next. We read Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, to prayer. They sold possessions to give to anyone who had need. I mean, that is revival with all caps. All bold. That's revival. It was a revival that moved from internal belief to external behavior. Like revival moved beyond personal salvation to community transformation. So maybe revival isn't revival if it just stays inside of you, if it just stays inside of me. Now, of course, here's what's tricky though. For decades, the church has relied on kind of consumeristic strategies to reach people, right? We built seeker-sensitive services. And listen, God used it. I've talked about this before, okay? I lived in this space. I have a lot of opinions about it, good and bad, because it wasn't all one or the other. God used it. At the same time, I think it trained a lot of us to think that faith is about what we get from it, not what God gives through us for others. So, that same mindset in a way, it feels like it's kind of showing up in how we talk about revival. We celebrate passion, but we rarely ask if it's, producing purpose. And true revival really does require dying to self, because revival is about resurrection, right? To revive is to bring something dead to life. It's about resurrection. And resurrection always begins with death. If selfishness doesn't die, revival can't live. That'll preach. I should do that one day. Maybe you should do that. I'll copy it. I'll see if I can take your notes. So what does this mean for you and me as a pastor? Or, if you're a ministry leader, church leader of any kind? I think it means at least this. We can't just preach revival. We have to lead it individually, personally. Like we have to lead our church to express revival, not just experience an emotional moment. Maybe ask these questions in your next staff meeting or elder meeting. How is our current revival changing our city? What systems could we adjust so that passion becomes more participatory? How can our revived hearts revive our community this month? At that exact same gathering, I'm going to give a shout out to a church. At the exact same gathering, I also was sitting in a circle with a leader from the Church of 1122 in Jacksonville, Florida. Great church, incredible things that God is doing there right now. I'm talking to her. She is their director, multi-campus director of service programming. So helping all the services happen, all the things that go into that. So she's in charge of that. We're having a great conversation. She said they recently had, and I want to say it was a men's event, a men's kind of a conference maybe. And maybe that wasn't true. I can't remember, but I think that's what she said. I do remember she specifically said that Willie Robertson of the Duck thing was there, and he was speaking at it. And while he was there, he is hanging around a little bit areas of Jacksonville, Florida. He's meeting people because, of course, people recognize him, but he's noticing something different. People are kinder. They are holding doors. They're not being selfish and asking just to take selfies with him, but they actually are asking him how he's doing. Why are you in town? It is so nice. He just said that it was such an interesting experience that felt distinctly different than most everywhere he goes. So the lady beside me, who's their director on staff, was talking to him in the green room about this, and he's recounting this whole experience in the city. And then he said, it was so telling, I started asking people, hey, do you go to church anywhere? And he said, almost every one of them said, oh yeah, I go to the Church of 1122. It's incredible, and it has changed my life. You know what was interesting, and this is what Willie Robertson kind of came to the conclusion and told the staff member. He said, I think that this church is actually changing this city, because that's really revival. That's a pretty powerful thing, to change a city through the church. See, here's what I think is true. We're going to kind of wrap up. God doesn't just want to revive people. I think that he wants revived people who revive places. And that is definitely a revival that's worth praying for. And I think it's a revival worth leading towards. So If this conversation in any way kind of resonates with you, I wrote a lot about this recently, and I wrote and have communicated, and several churches have used this content lately. I wrote a series called Revival, where we talk about personal internal revival. We talk about repentance because it's a prerequisite for revival. And we talk about the communities and what can happen when revived people begin to help revive things. So if you want any information about that, man, shoot me an email, gavin@gavinadams.com. You can go to gavinadams.com and shoot me a contact thing there. Just hit the Let's Talk button. I'd love for you to continue to dig into this with me because I do think God is up to something. I'm just not sure we're seeing it always the way that He sees it.